Good afternoon. It's my great pleasure to introduce today's distinguished speaker, and indeed he is a very distinguished speaker. Dr. Gilles Patry is the current CEO, President of Canada Innovation Foundation, Canada Foundation for Innovation. Gilles is a civil engineer, so that's the personal connection with me. But also he has a personal connection with Western engineering through Slobodan, and you got to know they have done the PhD together at California Davis. Gilles graduated with a bachelor and master's degrees from the University of Ottawa and went on to do his PhD at California. And then he moved around Canada, started in University of Montreal, then to McMaster. So we had dinner yesterday with a McMaster gang, everyone with McMaster background. And then he moved on to become the Dean of Engineering at the University of Ottawa, the Provost, the President, and he worked in industry as well, so he has the academia and industry administration sites. And then finally he came to lead the Canada Foundation for Innovation for 3 years almost now. And he brings to that wealth of experience and knowledge and hands-on experience with that. And we're very glad to have him here, and we're very glad to have the support of CFI to many of the major projects at Western, and particularly Western Indiana. So it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sean. First of all, I'm delighted to be here, and it's fun to see new faces. I haven't seen Slobodan for 30 years. We were in a small corner at UC Davis, and so don't think that in California that all of the offices are state of the art. I was in a trailer for 3 years, and so we shared a lot of experience. So it's wonderful to see him, and it's also delightful to see my colleagues from McMaster University. I would say that McMaster was the formative years for me, where essentially I really learned what being a faculty member was all about, and had tremendous support from colleagues, including Andy, because we shared, not shared, but we were very close physically in the Arthur Borns building, just across the hall, and we shared experiences with computing quite a bit, because both of us did a lot of modeling and simulation. So I won't talk about CFI directly, and that's because I thought that you are all familiar with CFI, and I don't want to bore you with programs and where we're going, etc. So I thought that I would talk about what is driving innovation in Canada, how the programs are operating, functioning, and then the role of CFI in this is going to come up. But this is going to be a much more general discussion, and I'd be delighted at the end to answer specific questions that you might have about CFI, CFI programs, CFI initiatives, where we're going, etc., where we think we might be going, because obviously we're not the master of where we want to go. We are obviously subject to the wishes of government. But so that's the plan for us today. You know, over the past decade, the consistent investments made by the Government of Canada in research and technology development have really transformed the research landscape of Canada's universities and colleges and research hospitals, for that matter. You know, Canada's gone from an era of brain drain in the early 90s. For those of you, and not too many with gray hair here, but you know, in the early 90s, we were essentially, when I first arrived, when I moved from McMaster to, should not have gone, when I moved from McMaster to Ottawa, my first job was to cut 25% of the Faculty of Engineering budget. And I think that Andy has had a bit of an easier time coming here. But 1993 were really difficult years, so we were losing faculty members to the US and to any parts of the world. And so the fact that we have been able to reverse that brain drain, and now I'll go back to the slides, and reverse that brain drain. There was supposed to be a slide that demonstrated the brain draining. And we've gone from struggling from research infrastructure that looked a little bit like this in the 1990s to state-of-the-art facilities that are very, very impressive, that CFI essentially has enabled through the years. I've decided today to talk about the importance of innovation, and why it's important for Canada, and how are the investments and the policies behind them are improving Canada's capacity for innovation, and are they working? So that's what we're going to try to address today. First, a word about CFI. CFI was created in 1997 by the Government of Canada to enhance our national capacity for research and innovation. And we do so by providing funding to universities, colleges, and research hospitals, and nonprofit research organizations for all type of research infrastructure. And the existence of CFI is essentially based on the premise that you cannot do world-class research without having access to state-of-the-art equipment. And so, it goes without saying that if you don't have the best possible tools, you might be outcompeted by researchers in other universities or other countries. So that's the premise on which CFI is based. It's also based on a very unique funding model, a model where CFI does not provide 100% of the funding to research infrastructure. We only provide 40% of the funding, and we ask our partners to provide 60%. And that's the institutions, that's the private sector, that's the governments, the provincial governments. And here in Ontario, the provincial government has been quite supportive of CFI investments, but it's not necessarily the same throughout the country. But that model is very different from what you're seeing at NSERC, SSHRC, and CIHR, where most of the funding is on a 100% basis. CFI's mandate is our performance is governed by a funding agreement that's very detailed with the Government of Canada, and we have 4 key objectives. Number 1 is to enhance the capacity of institutions to, number 1, attract and retain the world's top researchers, to enable researchers to undertake world-class research and technology development that leads to social, economic, and environmental benefits to Canada. And then the third one might surprise you, but that's exactly what CFI is asked to do, to support private sector innovation and commercialization, and then train the next generation of researchers. So if you see some emphasis changing as we are moving along, that might be due to some of those 4 criteria where we're trying to obviously balance the funding for basic research, discovery-driven research, and also the more technology development type of research activity. To date, we've essentially enabled more than $12 billion of investments. We've invested about $5.7 billion, it's 5.5 there, but 5.7 billion. Our partners have come in with about 6.7, 6.8. We're close to 13 billion. It's not quite 13 because some of that 6.7 is in kind, but the $12 billion investment is a fairly stable investment. And then the economic benefit associated with the investments that we have made is huge, not only through the construction of the facilities, but also through the ongoing operation of the facilities. So if we try to demonstrate to the government the impact of what CFI has done, it's not only transforming the research landscape of universities across Canada, but it's also, I think, having now an economic impact. But, and there is a but, we have to ask how well Canada is doing in the innovation game. And that's a challenge. And how well Canada is doing in the innovation game is really a matter of much debate these days. But perhaps the only point of general agreement is that the Canadian economy must be based on innovation in order to effectively compete in the global arena. Our exceptionally high standard of living cannot be maintained by relying solely on the exploitation of natural resources, and our industries cannot compete against those in developing countries based on the price of goods and services. It is only by bringing new ideas to the marketplace in the form of products, services, and processes that our standard of living can be maintained. Innovation has many definitions, but I've given you one here that comes from the Science and Technology Innovation Council. Innovation can be defined as the process by which individuals, companies, and organizations develop, master, or use new products, new designs, processes, and methods. But it's also important to keep in mind that innovation is not just about jobs and wealth creation. Innovation holds the potential to address a wide range of societal challenges, improving health through new medical innovations, developing new social policies and programs to alleviate poverty and deal with the impact of an aging population, finding new ways to protect the environment and increase national security. Innovation holds the key to both the economic and social well-being of all Canadians. But it's also important to stress that innovation is a really complex process. And I like to quote my colleague from Bud Peterson from Georgia Tech University when he says to his faculty members, and what I like to say to colleagues when I see them, that an idea is not an invention is not a product, and a product is not a business. The process of taking an idea and making a business out of it is quite complex and convoluted. And so we have to keep that in mind. And while Canada is doing very well in the idea to invention, well, not so much invention process, but in the discovery side of things, we are not doing well in converting those ideas to products and to businesses. And so that's what we're going to try to talk a little bit about. You know, in its 2010 State of the Nation report, the Government of Canada's Science and Technology Innovation Council made the fundamentally important point that the development of knowledge is the root of the country's innovation system. Research through which new knowledge is generated is the starting point in the innovation process. And in today's technology-driven, highly competitive, globally connected world, creative and highly trained individuals using the most advanced technologies are the key to translating ideas to new wealth-generating and socially beneficial products. Ensuring that the best researchers have state-of-the-art equipment they require to produce new knowledge lies at the heart of the mandate that was given to the CFI by the Government of Canada. And this is the role that CFI plays in supporting innovation in Canada, one that is crucial to our economic success and the quality of life. As I said, in 1997, the Government of Canada created CFI to address essentially at that time two specific and pressing problems: the rapidly degrading university and college infrastructure and the departure from Canada's most talented researchers to other countries. The evidence gathered by STIC for their 2010 report clearly indicates that these problems have been largely addressed. But new ones have emerged, particularly the sustainability of the current research enterprise and the private sector's limited use of publicly funded knowledge and the talent to produce wealth to remain competitive. And this assessment has been verified and reinforced by the just released report on the state of science in Canada conducted by the Council of Canadian Academies. And in fact, it's quite exciting that with less than 0.5% of the world's population, Canada produces 4.1% of the world's scientific papers and almost 5% of the world's most highly cited papers. And I would argue that this is due to the massive investments that Canada has made in research from the beginning of the year 2000 to today. In fact, if you were to look at the growth in funding of just the Tri-Council, don't even count CFI, the funding of the Tri-Council in 2000 was $800 million a year. So that's CIHR, SHRC, and NSERC. In 2010, the Tri-Council funding was $2.75 billion. So 3.2 times more what the government was putting in the year 2000. So there's been a massive investment, and I think the results that have been identified by the Council of Canadian Academies in this study are a testament to the investments that have been made throughout those years. So this is an astonishing accomplishment given the size of our population and of our economy. When we look at the areas, however, where Canada excels, few are related to engineering, and despite world-class scientific output, Canada holds only 1.7% of the world's patent and has a negative balance of almost $5 billion in royalties and licensing revenues. Over the past several years, a general consensus has emerged that the Canadian economy is not as innovative as it needs to be in order to remain competitive on the world stage. More precisely, the diagnosis is that not enough Canadian companies incorporate innovation in their core business strategies. A key indicator underlying this diagnosis, and the most relevant to the CFI, is the relatively low level of business investment in research and development. For example, the 2012-2013 World Economic Forum Global Competitive Index report ranks Canada 26th in terms of private sector spending on R&D, and thus at a distinct competitive disadvantage. The reasons why Canadian companies in certain sectors invest proportionally less in R&D than companies elsewhere are very complex, often structural, and not fully understood. And as the Council of Canadian Academies points out in their 2009 report, Canadian innovation performance, on Canadian innovation performance, and I quote, "There is no single cause of the innovation problem in Canada, nor is there any one-size-fits-all." So that's why we've had studies after studies after studies looking at how Canadian companies can become a little bit more innovative, and hopefully the Government of Canada will be able to address some of those shortfalls. The CCA report, however, did not conclude, and this is very important for this audience, that public investments in R&D are part of the problem. On the contrary, STIC came to much the same conclusion in its 2010 State of the Nation report. The past decade of federal investment in universities and college R&D has, to a very large extent, established the foundation on which a flourishing private sector innovation can be built. Through a total leverage investment, as I said earlier, of $12 billion in just over a decade, the Government of Canada has employed CFI as one of its main policy instruments to help create these conditions. Other instruments, such as the Research Granting Councils, NSERC, SSHRC, and CIHR, the Canada Research Chair Programs, the Canada Excellence Research Chairs, the networks of Centres of Excellence, and the CERCs, and so on and so forth, and a variety of graduate fellowship initiatives have been central to these achievements. I've tried to highlight here the ecosystem of research funding that exists in Canada. And when I show this abroad, and when people try to look at the total ecosystem, they understand that in Canada we have a pretty solid system to support research, and also to try to translate that research to the private sector. However, as we said, there is quite a bit of work to do in that sector. In fact, a number of these initiatives, such as the Centres of Excellence for Commercialization and Research, the CSERs, and the business-led NCEs, and the Industrial Research Assistance Program, have been specifically designed to foster collaboration between university and private sector researchers and facilitate the transfer of new knowledge and highly qualified individuals from public institutions to private companies. Of course, no government can force a private company to adopt innovation as part of its business strategy. It has often been said, however, that Canada's success as a nation lies in its ability to correct market failures. And this is most frequently done by creating conditions that make business success possible. And in fact, the chairman of the US Federal Reserve, Ben Bernanke, made exactly this point in a recent speech on the role of government in funding R&D by arguing, and I quote, and you've got the quote there, "The primary economic rationale for a government role in R&D is that, absent of such intervention, the private market would not adequately supply certain types of research," end of quote. And one of the Government of Canada's objectives in funding university-based R&D, establishing knowledge transfer programs such as the CSERs, and providing generous R&D tax credit, is to compensate for and hopefully increase the relatively limited private sector R&D expenditures, as well as fund leading-edge, groundbreaking research that produces transformational innovation and entirely new industries. And this is particularly important in engineering, and in engineering-led areas, such as manufacturing, for example, because of its reliance on R&D as a driver for innovation and competitive success. As Pierre Marty mentioned, the president of the Canadian Academy of Engineering recently, Canadian manufacturers account for more than 50% of the total business expenditures in R&D, but as a result, though, manufacturing remains the most productive and innovative sector in the Canadian economy. However, it should be noted that the R&D spending in the manufacturing sector has declined by 62% of the total business R&D spending a decade earlier. So we do have a challenge in that sector. Engineering, of course, covers a great deal more than manufacturing, and this is reflected in the size and scope and type of investments that CFI has made over the past 15 years. Since its creation, as I've indicated, CFI has committed $5.7 billion to date in support of more than 7,600 projects at 130 institutions across the country. These projects cover every discipline and every research area, from the social sciences to science, engineering, medicine, health, and so on. Altogether, since 1997, CFI has funded over 4,000 engineering and engineering-related research projects, representing investments of just over $2.6 billion. These projects cover every type of engineering research, from space robotics to the design of new biomedical devices. The infrastructure includes everything from high-performance computing facilities to nanomaterial fabrication, laboratories, to the automotive industry. Here at Western, for example, CFI has provided just over $87 million for 192 projects. And indeed, engineering at Western has received over half of all CFI funding at this institution. That is 155 of the total of 155 million of the 260 projects. So the 87 million was the slide. $155 million for Western, 262 projects. Engineering at Western, 87 million for 192 projects. And to give you an idea of the impact that CFI funding has made at Western, I'd like to talk about two examples, some of that you know, at least one of them that you know very well. Both are in very different areas. One was started through CFI support in its first major infrastructure competition, and the second is just about to be launched. Both projects are also excellent examples of the strategic directions that CFI has recently mapped for the organization. Supporting research excellence above else, forging productive partnerships that foster engagement and improve innovation capacity, and developing global research influence that puts Canadian researchers and Canadian research capacity on the world stage. So the first example is the National Centre for Audiology, founded through a CFI grant made in 1999, one of the first grants that we awarded for $1.2 million. The Centre received a second round of CFI funding in November 2006 for about $667 million to significantly upgrade the existing facility and to create several new laboratories. The Research Centre facilitates research excellence and innovation by bringing together the necessary human and laboratory resources to form collaborative groups with existing excellent researchers forming the core. Researchers at the National Centre for Audiology have improved the accuracy of hearing aid fittings and hearing assessment for babies by developing a method for ensuring that unique acoustic characteristics of infant ear canals. The clinical procedures for fitting these aids have been adopted by pediatric audiologists around the globe. The researchers work with hearing aid companies to improve their products, and CFI-funded labs are a training ground for students who go on to work with the manufacturers. This is one of the most important objectives of CFI funding. Canada's universities and colleges are the training ground for the next generation of innovators who will drive economic development and commercial success. In 2009, more than 26,000 graduate students used CFI-funded infrastructure as a key resource in their research and training, and more than 6,000 technicians were trained in the use and maintenance of that equipment. Fully one-half of the graduate students find good, rewarding jobs in the private sector. So they are leaders that will foster Canadian innovation, economic development, and social progress in the years ahead. But none of these resources, human or physical, would be available to the private sector without the Government of Canada's consistent investments in R&D. So the second example is one that you know very well, and that's Windy. And this is one that we've been involved with more directly in recent years. And as the Windy website states, and I quote, "The Windy Dome, the world's first hexagonal wind tunnel, represents a technological breakthrough in the study of wind-related phenomena, as it has the capability of physically simulating high-intensity wind systems, including tornadoes, downbursts, gust fronts, and low-level nocturnal currents, that cannot be created in any of the existing wind tunnels. The $30 million facility will be used to understand the impact of the local storms on buildings and structures, wind turbines, forest, and crops. It will also improve the positioning and design of wind farms and study pollutant and contaminant dispersal, end of quote. The CFI, in fact, is very proud to have invested over $12 million in that facility, plus our IOF funding, because this is really a national unique facility. Not only will the facility allow Western researchers to conduct world-class leading-edge research, but as the facility managers point out, the Windy facility will play a key role in developing Western's regional, national, and international research collaborations. And the European collaborations are highlighted in this particular slide that I stole from your colleague here that is present. These international relations, or these international research collaborations, benefit Canada in three specific ways. They allow Canadian researchers and organizations to draw talent and knowledge from around the world in order to increase domestic research and innovation capacity. Number two, they build connections across the globe, opening up new possibilities for Canadian research undertakings and new markets for Canadian business. And finally, three, they allow Canadian researchers and the organizations they work with to contribute their expertise and innovations to meeting global challenges. So state-of-the-art research infrastructure is one of the key drivers in establishing global influence and facilitating Canadian participation in the global research undertakings. As we see with the Windy Dome, such facilities also attract international collaborators to Canada. Adopting a strategic focus on building Canadian influence in the global research enterprise will allow Canada to seize opportunities that are currently being missed by Canadian innovation to the world. And bring Canadian innovation to the world, sorry. And by drawing foreign researchers to Canada and ensure that CFI-funded facilities are fully exploited. In the closing remarks of the 2010 State of the Nation report, the Science and Technology Innovation Council states that it is the job of those who partner with industry, including governments and research institutions, to enable performance gains by adapting, consolidating, and simplifying the policy instruments and mechanisms for collaborating with the private sector on innovation. And there we certainly have a role. The CFI has been from the very beginning, embraced this approach by designing simple, open funding competitions that place excellence and benefits to Canada above all other considerations. The current CFI funding agreement states that the CFI is expected to enhance the capacity of grant recipients to support, as I said earlier, private sector innovation and commercialization. Funding the infrastructure to be used by Canada's top researchers to produce the knowledge that will be then commercialized by industry is the only vitally important way to meet this expectation. Without the infrastructure that underlies and supports Canada's research enterprise, the commercialization activities of these researchers and the private sector partners would simply not be possible. The fact remains that research-based private sector innovation is, in the end, is the end product of a complex, cumulative, and unpredictable process. By focusing our funding on infrastructure, the foundation on which research knowledge is produced, by ensuring that the top researchers supported through our sister organizations like NSERC, SSHRC, and CIHR, have the tools they need to produce the new knowledge and train the next generation of researchers, and by investing in research that meets the needs of industry, CFI plays a fundamentally important role in the overall innovation process. In the end, however, the central question is not what public organizations like CFI are doing, but whether we have the right levels of investments and the right mix of policy instruments to effectively support innovation, and perhaps more importantly, remain competitive in a rapidly changing global environment. What are the most important, most practical steps that Canadian governments, private sector companies, and universities take to boost Canada's pace of innovation and productivity? What specific changes to government policies or programs would make the greatest difference in encouraging R&D investments in Canada? Despite consistent and substantial investments by the Government of Canada in university R&D, and one of the most generous private sector R&D tax incentive in the world, the ratio of total R&D spending to the size of the Canadian economy has been declining for several years. And this is a very worrying slide. We've gone from 2.1% of GDP down to 1.8, and in reality we're down this year to about 1.7%. That is scary. Now, at the same time, higher education expenditures in R&D has gone up. It's fairly stable now. But this is obviously, some of this is associated with the debacle of Nortel, and you can imagine if one of our other major players were to vanish, that the impact in the business R&D would be even more significant. This comparative decline is particularly evident in the private sector. Next slide. Okay. It's particularly evident in the private sector business R&D. If we normalize business expenditure in R&D to 2007 and give that a ranking of a value of 100, Canada in business R&D has gone from 100 to 85, whereas countries like China has gone from 100 to 170. But countries even like Italy, the US, and Korea have all increased their level of expenditures in business R&D. So that is another worrying sign. While the world is increasing its R&D even after the 2008 fiscal collapse, the world is recovering, but Canada is still lagging behind. So this comparative decline becomes most evident in the World Economic Forum, and I won't go into detail except to point out that in the World Economic Forum there are 12 pillars that are used to calculate the Global Competitive Index, and one of the last pillars is innovation. And if you look at innovation, Canada now ranks 25th in its capacity for innovation, 26th in the quality of 16th in the quality. We've decreased our position from 2010. Now, that again is a worrying sign that we need to eventually address. I do not want, however, to imply that we are in some sort of crisis, even though it may sound like it. Indeed, many indicators suggest that Canada is exceptionally well placed to remain competitive on the world stage. For example, Forbes magazine recently ranked Canada as the #1 country in the world to do business, based on such factors as property rights, taxes, technology, a lack of corruption, freedom, red tape, investor protection, stock market performance, etc. The CCA report on Canada's research strengths provides solid evidence for our outstanding performance or capacity to conduct scientific research. In commissioning the Jenkins report, the Government of Canada has shown a keen interest in understanding the innovation challenges we face and in seeking potential solutions. Clearly, we have much to build on. So where do we go from here? A few suggestions. Number one, better align research capacity with national priorities. This can be best achieved through a combined bottom-up, top-down approach where the government takes a facilitating role in engaging all sectors in a comprehensive, forward-looking discussion about what is important to Canadians. This can be achieved through the use of existing neutral mechanisms, such as the Public Policy Forum and the Conference Board of Canada, for example. Number two, bring people together, both virtually and physically. And I always like to quote the networks of centers of excellence. I mean, this is one of the best creations that Canada has produced, to bring the expertise together in a virtual environment, but we also need to bring people together physically, because it's by colliding and meeting with others that you now exchange ideas and move the agenda and create knowledge. And finally, build on our strengths in industry, in academic research, and in public policies that maintain quality of life for all Canadian citizens. Canada has a long-established strength in many industrial sectors, including transportation, communication, resource extraction, agriculture, all of which require both science and engineering to remain competitive. We also have significant research strengths in related areas, including ICT, mining and petroleum, chemistry, forestry, aerospace, and automotive product. By providing effective incentives through funding and identifying the challenges through the interactions and dialogue, these research strengths can become world leading. And finally, Canada has an enviable reputation for good public policies and enterprise management in both the public and the private sector. Sound public policies in areas such as environmental stewardship, combined with effective management practices, open enormous possibilities for all sectors in producing the innovation products and services we all need to meet today's global challenges. Thank you.
You can go away. You can go. Thank you so much for a very informative presentation. We have some time for a few questions, so we will entertain some questions if you have any.
And you can have them on CFI-related activities. I tried to stay very general on CFI, but if you do have CFI-related questions, please do not hesitate. Yes?
Hi, thank you for your presentation. This slide is very interesting. Where do we go from here? So, how do we decide what is national priorities for, and to align this with our research capacity?
Well, I think we have to look at where we're good at and the strengths that we have, and we can't be, and this is one thing that I think CFI can be credited for, and I'm not taking the benefit, you know, I was not the instigator of this, but when CFI was created, it required all universities to identify a strategic research plan, identify your strengths and your priorities, and our investments were then supposed to be aligned, and your requests to us were then supposed to be aligned with your strategic research plan and priorities. And it's the same thing, you know, at a much broader scale. We have to identify what are the key areas for Canada. Obviously, and there's been a lot of discussions. There was an op-ed piece by David Naylor at the U of T probably a year and a half ago on we've got great natural resources, but we don't do a lot of R&D associated with our natural resources. I mean, we're just starting, and we lost the battle in the forestry industry because all of the innovation in the forestry industry is essentially being imported to Canada from the Scandinavian countries. And so we have to identify what are the strengths of Canada, where can we excel, where can we be best in the world. And one of the things that the UK has just done, they've looked at creating what they call TICs. They've changed it now. They've changed the names because in English TICs does not, if you've got TICs, it's not the right word. But these are Technology Innovation Councils. There's 7 of them, 7 Technology Innovation Councils. And they have to have a certain number of qualities. One is that we have to be good in those areas, number one, because you can't afford to wait until you become excellent because somebody else is going to surpass you. So identify those. Number 2, there has to be a global market for what you're going to do. So there has to be a world, multi-billion-dollar global market. You're not going to put massive investments into something where the investments and the potential return are not global and they're not significant. So that's the second aspect. And they've been able to identify 7 major investment areas that they now call not TICs, but catapults, essentially to overtake the world. So the problem is that the world is not standing still. While we invest in R&D and universities, etc., the world is moving on and is investing even more massively. And the thing that we don't have in Canada, and I'm pleasantly not surprised I knew about what's happening at Western, but the situation here, I must say, is probably a little bit atypical of the average Canadian university in that you've got very strong partnerships with the private sector. I mean, the events that you'll be having next week are a testament to that. And so those are part of the elements, but you can't have just one institution or 2 or 3 that have essentially identified that area and that potential for collaboration. You have to essentially have this transpiring across your DNA, and that's the challenge that we have. And we have to make sure that, when I say to my colleagues, CFI applicants, we're not looking for partners. You should not be looking for partners, that's not it. You should be looking for partnerships. People who want access to your research results, that are interested, not in giving you a discount, but in getting information from the research that you are generating so that they can improve their business model and their business performance. That's the key. Otherwise, business is there just to make some money, and too many of those. Just a little bit.
Yeah, Gilles, I'm turning the question a little bit different. direction. I'm interested, it's from the researcher's perspective, that there is some kind of disconnection between CFI and the basically research funding, the research funding agencies. Is there awareness of that within your office, and is there anything being done to possibly link this investment in infrastructure to support for research that you cut from the main funding agencies?
And there's a bit of hints in that question about issues like RTI and MRS and all sorts of things that obviously have been very, very timely right now. First of all, let me say that the Tri-Council and CFI, known as TC3+, the Tri-Council presidents meet every month. So we meet every month. This is something that Chad Gaffield, the president of SHIRT, has instituted. People are very surprised to see that, the four of us every month will meet. We obviously discuss these issues. We are very much aware, and I've had the pleasure of meeting three of the environmental colleagues this morning, where we're chatting about some of the challenges that are being created by some of the decisions that have been taken or that are about to be taken by some of the councils. We have to be very careful at CFI because of the mandate that we have. I do not want the Leaders Opportunity Fund, for example, the LOFT, and I said this to Claire and the colleagues, I do not want the Leaders Opportunity Fund to become an RTI program. We're not in that business unless we change and we become a granting council. So that poses a real challenge. So we have to find a way of addressing the gap between the types of resources that you need on an ongoing basis to conduct your research and the type of strategic investments that CFI is called upon to make in more institutionally based facilities. So we always say that we do not fund researchers. There may be a name in the research application. It's not so much true for the lofts because there is that element. But for a left-NIF application, for an innovation application, we do not consider that this is a researcher investment. We consider that this is an institutional investment because it is the vice president of research that needs to sign off that he will be sustaining that facility. And I like to remind all of the university vice president research and the university presidents that they've all signed these documents, even though they're knocking at our door and at the door of Industry Canada to support even national facilities at this time, because they all sign on these national facilities that they would have the resources to operate them. We understand and we are very, very aware of the challenge. So we're going to try to address the problem. So it's a very convoluted answer, if probably not even an answer to your question, but we are very much aware of the challenges. And we certainly don't want to create a gap in the process in one council in particular that obviously would be detrimental to the researchers. And we don't want to necessarily, unless the government decides to do it, to change the mission of CFI, because we don't like to be in the business of funding a $20,000 or $30,000 piece of equipment. We've done that in the past. That's really not what CFI was created for, as I've indicated in the talk. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, so in your talk, you talked a bit about how a lot of the research that goes on at the university, there's a weak link between that and innovation that happens in the private sector. So how much of that do you think is inhibited, or how much of that weakness is attributed to the fact that a lot of publicly funded research dollars tends to end up in like private pay-for-access journals? Or hopefully that's not true.
Yeah, no, I see where you're going in, but there is a move right now for open access publications. And the UK has just signed on to an open access publication model. And at the TC3+, one of our last discussions was to ensure that we would look at a way of encouraging, supporting financially an open access policy. It's even worse than what you've just described in many ways, because in the health sciences and sometimes in the engineering field, not only is the journal a private journal and costs sometimes $20,000 per copy for a library to acquire it, okay, I'm not exaggerating, but most of the time the researcher had to pay to be published in those journals. So you had a 2,000 or a 3,000. I mean, water research for many years. We had to pay a couple of $1,000s to be published, and it's our intellectual property. So it's the world upside down in many ways. So, but there, you probably will see an open access policy for publication from the TC3, not from us, because we don't fund research, but from the Tri-Council. Any other questions? Yes?
I have a question on a completely different subject. You mentioned in your presentation that national centers of excellence, this is a very good idea, it works well because it is essential to bring people together so they can talk. You're probably aware of discussion in the educational field that we should be promoting online teaching. And online teaching eliminates human contact. So how do you...
Yeah. It's funny because one of the last time that I was here, or one time that I was here, was for the engineering conference on engineering education that Western hosted. And my claim to fame at McMaster is what I was the originator of what is called the Mac-Eng microsystem, i.e. providing a computer to every engineering student so that we would all develop self-paced courses on the computer and diminish the level of formal teaching. I think we have, the MOOCs, as they are called, the massive online open access courses, are quite interesting and quite innovative in many ways. And I've been on the websites of many of the universities that have subscribed to the MOOCs. And I must say that some of the courses are absolutely fantastic. I mean, I started listening to several lectures in my own area. However, as I said, from the research perspective, you want to create virtual environments, but you want to create physical environments where people meet. So I don't think, in all honesty, even though there's a movement right now in Ontario to move to online courses, I think this will be essentially a small component of the activity. But if it does free up the faculty member to develop a closer interaction with the students in a problem-solving mode, I think that would also be another way of doing it. So that's my personal bias. But I must say that I haven't been in the classroom since 2004, so I'm a little bit disconnected there. But based on what I'm seeing and the discussions that I'm having with students still on campuses, the students want a physical interaction. On the other hand, having said that, the generation that comes in right now at your university this year and next year and the following years will probably be the generation that has been online the most, obviously, and will have a frame of reference that's totally different from the students of 10 years or 15 years ago. So that, I think, we have to be a little bit careful. I talked about online courses. If you want to have fun, when I finished my presidency at the University of Ottawa, I went, this was really of concern to me. So I went to the website of Berkeley, because they do put their courses there. And I went and I looked at the first year chemistry course. And I invite you to do that. The course was being taught in exactly the same way that I learned it in 1966, 67. Faculty member was writing on the chalkboard, speaking to 300 students. There was no visual interactions, no dialogue, nothing. And this is on the website. You can go in and have a look at it. That's not the type of MOOC, massive online open access courses that we're talking about, I hope, because that would simply defeat the purpose. The idea of recording a lecture and just broadcasting it does not achieve that objective, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, it's not recorded in 1966.
It may have been.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights to the state of innovation in Canada and the direction kind of sticking right now, and as a token of appreciation.
First of all, on behalf of the group, I want to thank Dr. Patry for the insight and discussion. I have to say, when you were talking about that there's no time for complacency on this innovation agenda, I can give testament to that. And a week ago, I've been funded by the galvanized steel industry since 1998. When I first started, it's about 50 companies around the world. When I first started and I looked around the table, it was Canadian mining companies, Canadian steel companies, etc. My last meeting last week, none. It's all been bought out. So it definitely, we're in a global competition, and there's no time for complacency. We thank you for your call to support the innovation drive, and thank you for all the compliments for the things we're doing in Western engineering, and a memento of your visit here, and thank you so much. For attending this distinguished lecture, and please have a good day. Thank you.
I hope it doesn't take 30 years, because I'm going to be next time you're in Ottawa. No, okay. How are you? I said, yeah, I didn't know if it was ready. I was like, wow, I'm not sure. And I just gave her your contact. He said, nice seeing you online for like Western. Oh, yes, I remember. Like I went and searched, and the only thing that came up was Western, water center of excellence, and all that came up was like the Western news article from 2 years ago or something. I was like, if I can't even point to it, I'm like, this is it. Like, it's tricky too. Yeah. Anyway, I wanted to give her some. I wanted to say, here's some links to look at it. And I was like, well, here's a newspaper article from Western News. But cock today, he knows. So, well, if she gets it, there's a lot of good stuff happening. A lot of good stuff. We're going to actually, you know the star. Yes. So we're looking at the star. Solid waste. Because the link there is that we just got funding from the AIDS Foundation to build a point in the developing world. We've proven that you can waste into mix in the sand. Reactivate all the schools just like so if you go and destroy the waste, no water and no water.
Yeah, we're looking at different ways of doing that. This is a developing world, so we're going to use cooking robust start it, just like you start your stove. Enjoy like you just start running and
He's got a more type of a show mirror.
oh, it's the mirror.
Basically, it can be used
way to concentrate on some energy. By email? Sure. And then I'll set up a copy. That'd be great. And then I'll have a copy of this and we'll talk about this. I also need to hire somebody. So maybe one of these graduates or performance to hire a 1 year basically mechanical engineer to run this. So that's what I'm just writing the ad today, so I can people to send it to, so that they'll help do this much better. Yeah. As you mentioned, well, that would be good. Except we need to be ignited at night as well. Okay, let's go. But again, we're going to store it. Anecdotal you can store it Well, I obviously got something. Ruining my reputation if I partner with you in the industry sector. But I think there's a balance. We didn't have this discussion. Those 4 points I mentioned. So researchers send their proposal to you, criticize it. So were you involved also in the left group?
No, I was surprised.
The week of
Remember the 20th was the date.
it's the 21st. Next city on the 20th.
You gotta get it in here.
Okay. All right. Thanks, George.
You're very welcome. So, hello.
Take care. It was nice seeing you again.
Yes.
Take care.
Yes.
Thank you again.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for coming.
mean, the big issue is the NC. The NC that is associated with managed by VM. And yeah, they're mixing around. You never know. Trying to enter from within
And people walking in there.
and it's not me just addressing this, it's on
To have
You were the most.
down there.
Paula had a poster, Charmaine's office had posters. Sheila was distributing it, so I think it helps.
Hey,
But still,
can you talk to John? Yes. Can you respond back? Yep.
still
You don't sit on the committee?
I was very happy.
I've been here trying to set things up so we can sit them like barriers or whatever. I'm trying to do it. Don't help. Okay, that's off. You
Thank you very much.
are off.
Very busy, very busy. Busy, actually. I'm still helping to cover Virginia. And she's a very, very busy people. And I always think, oh, wait, John just came in.
So we're still gonna, we gotta
The back screen.
back screen, and we gotta coordinate.
But otherwise, it's good. It's fun. I mean, mostly it's fun.
There's only 2 terms that can be done.
I will.
Mondays is
Perfect. That's great. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming today.
1 hour window. So that actually seems each hour or whatever.
When you say the following.
Everything's locked up in there.
Help yourself to cookies. You left outside.
Fill up my pockets.
Good idea.
Coffee and cookies.
Oh. I guess I better now make sure that you
It's not just good, we're done.
There's something wrong with me. I have to be honest, I didn't really appreciate the feedback that we got from our. I got a page of stuff, none of it made any sense. It was basically like, there's something you don't know about in your episode. Because to be told, you know, you're not working to get a little evidence, working together as a team, things like that, it just doesn't make sense. The missing no big initiative. Predict. Draws as many people in from as many fields. Any field. Co-ops and grants. Well, we miss it.
Hexagonal internals okay, the hexagonal is the caveat, but there may be some.
Oh, I had that as a question. What, is it just because you couldn't afford dodecahedral?
Those statements in animation, the largest, biggest, best.
Well, we don't like to miss
Yes.
and that's what you identify as supportable. Working against us is. To be honest, I still think searching for so I don't lose. I think it's a terrible choice. Even like the idea that the way forward for us is disruptively pulling from our site, but it didn't work very well within. It did work well.
It still doesn't sound like a good one.
I gotta be waiting for it. But I'm like, yeah, I'm following this because Lean was on this too, right, David? And Trevor and I think probably Trevor and Steve and I at some point. We will all have a chat about.
Yeah, I mean Trevor. He says Trevor was opted, so he knows all the.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
But we're still not doing something.
Okay.
Last thing that we said. So many things that just put together. The CFI is so in that application, I went to the trouble of creating a network node because there's software that's you've got a database.
Because we manage, we have students, we have been able to get money from industry.
Lots that are interconnected nodes quite graphically. And that is something that only needs to stay on top of. So it's lots each individual as a dot. The more papers you have, the bigger your dot.
Help yourselves to coffee and cookies outside.
The lines bring it out to all co-op.
That was important to them.
We got like 20
It's interesting because I joined Korea when he
and everyone in the group is
and Wind Tunnel Lab, showed him Mini Windy and so on. And this morning. Yeah.
the interconnectivity
That is a big deal for them.
that comes across graphically is enhanced. You have a paper with Gordon, I have a paper with Trevor, and those two have a paper with each other. And showing that. Which is reasonable.
See you guys.
Bye.
Hey guys.
Take care. Thanks.
Yes, so I dumped it right into the CFO.
I think we need a sustainability plan.
On the team.
And then keep it names you so that it goes to them, not just the faculty.
Yeah.
He's asking you basically to plan the.
You could, we don't do it as a graphic.
Story and Ruben's
But
saying, this is the problem.
I gathered at that time that we were putting it together, that clearly they go out of our way
Bullshit.
to demonstrate.
Because we couldn't make money.
On the other hand, I can also say with honesty.
But you don't have the capacity, but you don't have the capacity.
Years.
My son Federico was invited to work, what expenses paid.
In the first 2 years, what we did was get a lot of grants that involved multiple people. But then they had to get the grants and do the research and
negative thing, and I mean, it's unbelievable. The Americans
all this
that
kind
are
of
willing to
presentation.
they're taking us fantastic things, you know. It
I
goes
have a
beyond
personal
what Gilles was saying. The problem is actually
issue of
we have
integrity where
ideas,
I would
we have innovation, we develop nice
go out of
work.
the way to speak.
And then to go from there to what the industry wants, which is industry wants to do
I just think
that.
eventually
They don't
come
want
back
to
to
sponsor, you know, the final development.
But while it's working,
They want
it's working, it's great.
And there is a big gap there in taking something and making it professionally a business. And that's the big difficulty that we have.
No,
I understand. That takes a lot of time. In our case, they are loading us with teaching. We have lots of teaching, lots of graduate students. Because all this research funding that we have access to, would be the best in the world. We don't have the capacity. We are trying to hire another professor. They are putting all the hours that they can. Exactly. They have exactly right to the application. Never acknowledge the application.
Robotic surgery on a 50-year-old man.
Meeting with the planetary science guys, same situation.
Okay, they haven't done a left.
$18 million over the last 5 years.
NASA
basically robotics, calm down initiatives, cleaning up our waste baskets.
Because, you know what, we weren't actually.
You know, Janice is listening. Janice is listening. So the key here is to get you off the.
Somewhere between the two is perfect. And I don't have any doubt. You're right.
So bring them on.
Then looking through all the things that we have, there are
The Center for Planetary Space.
objectively identifiable things that superlatives can be applied to. First in the world.
We are not struggling to raise the money. Yesterday, I had to put this plan because they can't. You know what they do?
Well, there's a simple way to package what you're saying.
And they charge us twice. I mean, I saw this, I immediately you don't realize this, but then when you go to the details, it charges us twice. Then I called them, I said, no, now you come here, and I'll show you what this. Oh, yeah, I don't know, I cannot understand why they charge you twice.
$1 billion company, and
No, I know.
there's a CEO and 7 under him.
Hi, Tony. Yes.
We got him for a day, and I got to do dogs and ponies that were more like our discussion than him reviewing crap. And I think he genuinely came away
So
really
you have to give me the contact.
program, and I hope we'll be able to, this is Nassim, we'll capture something out of this.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Talk about
Because I want to hear what you say.
But he got a kind of a sense of excitement and capability that.
Yes, if you can just drop by on the way back and give the card, give it to Christina. I'm not at the institute right now. You just give it to the reception, it's there. Yeah. Yeah. Or whatever is more convenient for you. Okay, if you drop it, I'm not at the house, but you can just put it in a mailbox. Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Tommy. And then next week we will organize. You tell me when you are going to be available to get started.